Well, welcome back to the Where is the Love dating seminar. And in this session, what we're going to be talking about the entire time is looking for what kind of a person you should date, like who you should date, and the characteristics and qualities that you should be looking for. Because we talked about in the last session, that's kind of a big deal. Now, I want to clarify, though, because I'm going to be talking about two kinds of dating. One is casual dating, where it's not about going steady, it's not about being in a relationship, it's just, dating different people at the same time. And that actually looks a lot different than the kind of person that you want for a serious relationship, or especially looking for the qualities that you need in somebody to marry. So the qualities we're actually going to be talking about through this session are about looking for what qualities are important to look for in the person that you would marry someday and in the person that you would want to have a serious relationship with. But if you're casual dating, you don't know that much about the person, so there's not really an opportunity. I mean, you can't, if you're going out for coffee with somebody for the first time, it would be impossible to even know the things that we're going to talk about as far as all the things that you want to look for in a person. So the point and the purpose of casual dating, which I think is really a valuable thing that people just don't do that much today, I think anymore, it seems to me that people seem to jump into relationships rather quickly, and a lot of people are actually even uncomfortable with dating different people at the same time. Now, casual dating, I mean really casual dating. It's not sex with somebody. It's, like you could go have coffee with somebody, or, have dinner, or go to a movie, or just where you're kind of getting to know people. And the valuable thing about casual dating is that in that process, that's actually a good way to learn how to be discerning about the qualities that you're looking for, how to recognize the qualities that you're looking for in a person. Because these are things that you have to learn. They're not automatically discerned. So that's casual dating. But the qualities that we're going to be defining more specifically are qualities to look for in a long-term relationship, going steady, marriage, those kind of qualities. Now, I'm going to advocate that it's a good thing to have a list of things that you're looking for. And on that list, I would suggest having a list of negotiable and non-negotiable characteristics. And a lot of people, when you ask them, what are you looking for in somebody, or especially if you say, okay, what are you looking for in the person that you want to marry, I'm always surprised, actually, because I love asking people this question. I love kind of hearing what they have to say. And most of the time, people's response is more like, I want somebody with a great sense of humor. Humor is everything. If I meet somebody that makes me laugh, that's the person for me. Or I want somebody smart, or I want somebody with nice abs, or, I don't know, I want somebody blonde, whatever. People have got sort of these ideas about what they're looking for, and I'm always amazed that, I don't even think that I've ever seen a time where I've asked that question where I've gotten answers back that related to character issues. And character is everything when it comes to being married. We talked about in the last session about how hard it is to make a marriage work and why. We talked about why you need communication skills and some of those things. Well, you have to have somebody that has integrity, in honesty, for instance, is something that should be non-negotiable. It's not possible to have a good, safe relationship. You cannot spend your life committed to somebody that's not honest. So that should be something that people don't think about as making a priority, that matters to them. So that would be a character issue that should be, in my opinion, these should be things that everyone should have on their non-negotiable list, because it's just not possible to make a relationship work without these character issues. So this session in particular, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about what a safe person looks like and an unsafe person. And so we can all move into being safe people and be looking for safe people to have relationships with. For instance, if somebody, now this is interesting as far as why to make the distinction between non-negotiable and negotiable, because often people put more emphasis on the non-negotiable, such as the looks or the sense of humor or hobbies or whatever those preferences. Those are really tastes and preferences kind of things, which are valid. It's not like you should be like, who cares whether you're attracted to somebody? It shouldn't be that. But it's really tempting to when you're dating somebody, and I've gotten stuck with this many times, where like the first person I dated actually, right after I was got out, right after I got divorced. One of the first people I dated was, oh my God, looked like the perfect person. I was so into this guy, it was ridiculous. On paper, he looked like my dream guy. And I really thought when I first met him, I thought, oh, I've gotten the man from the Lord. You know, I just thought, well, isn't God good to me that I don't even have to wait and be single? You know, like because I had in my mind that I was going to, you know, being divorced statistics, you know, and all that, and being not that young, that I really kind of thought, oh, I'm going to be lonely, I'm going to be single a long time. That's what I had in my head that was going to happen. And so I met this guy right away, and I'm like, wow, isn't God good? He's perfect. He's like, oh, he's a good-looking guy, and he was successful, and he was smart, and, you know, had all of the, you know, things that I was attracted to. And he was a Christian. He actually even said, oh, you brought me back to the Lord, you know, because he had been a Christian when he was younger. And so for one problem is I got into him too fast, which is not a good idea. You don't know somebody. You really need to take time. We're going to talk about pacing quite a bit in another session. But I got into him way too quickly. And so one of the things that came up is early in the relationship, it turned out that I found out that he deceived me about something on purpose. It wasn't like a bold-faced lie, but what happened was he made me, the way he told the story about his last relationship was that he made it seem like they had been broken up for a year, the way that he told the story. And I came to find out that he'd only been broken up with a serious relationship 2 weeks before he went out with me. So when I found out, I was like, I asked him, I said, like, you made me think this. And he said, yeah, but would you have gone out with me if you knew? And I was like, no, I wouldn't. And he said, see? And I'm like, no, I deserve to know that. Like, I deserve to have that information to make that decision, because the truth is I would have chosen differently. But the problem was I was then so attached to those non-negotiable things. And I was thinking, I'm never going to find a guy like this. I was so desperate then and so needy that I was like clinging on to the relationship. And even though it was at the beginning of my learning some of these things, so I knew that that should be a red flag. And I knew that that should be my first instinct, actually. And I did initially back off from it. But then I started going, I'm never going to find anybody. I'm going to be so lonely. And where am I ever going to meet somebody? And maybe he didn't really mean it. And I started kind of, you know, rationalizing it because I was so desperate for those other things. So that's we need to really be wise about how much we're not elevating the non-negotiable things, and then that we're not focusing on the negotiable things and not compromising on the non-negotiable things. So that's what's really important. So my goal is to help you to be really clear on what it should look like as far as non-negotiable, and to get you desiring that, to get you motivated to see why it's a priority, why it would make a big difference in a relationship. And so that's what we're going to spend a lot of time on. Because honesty should be one of those things that, and this is why it should be non-negotiable, if they were perfect on your list of non-negotiable, I mean, you know, the dreamboat guy for you girls, or the most perfect woman on earth for you guys, they have everything, like everything you ever dreamed, you know. And they're liars, they should score 0. It should be as if it just wipes off everything, like none of those other things matter. You know what I'm saying? They should really, because it's not possible for you to have a relationship that your heart can be safe if somebody's not honest. You need honesty in order to keep your heart safe and be in a good relationship. So that's what I mean as far as the value of being really clear about this. The other thing about making a list now, if you're not in a relationship, or I shouldn't say now because maybe you're in a relationship, but it's better to put the list together when you're not in a relationship, because the temptation is to, you know, to make your list to be fitting who you're with, you know, because you want it to work out. So you have a tendency to sort of, already once you meet somebody, at least for me, and I think I'm not so uncommon, you know, it's hard not to want to change your list when you meet somebody. So that's why it's important to be clear about this and to have friends that know what matters to you and what you value, so that they're looking out for these things for you as well and helping you to get it and say, what are you thinking? So some of the other things, we're going to look at actually a list, actually. I want to go through with you of safe people and unsafe people. And I kind of pulled this list. Some of these are some of the chapter headings and et cetera from a book called Safe People by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. It's a really good book. And so we'll go over some of these things that I pulled out of this book and kind of talk about this and help you to be a little bit clearer. Okay, unsafe people says that they think that they have it all together instead of admitting their weaknesses. Now, what's really interesting is you've probably heard I have a lot of people that tell you, I'm not perfect, Well, that's saying nothing. That's kind of like, duh, What have they just told you by saying, I'm not perfect, It's not really admitting anything. So what we want, though, is not that. That's not, that does nothing. In fact, what you want is somebody that is not trying to play it off as the together person, which, there are no together people. And it's important to recognize that. I used to think that there were together people out there, that I was the person that was secretly, I felt kind of like I was the outsider or the black sheep, and I was always trying to fit in and play it off like I was like all those other people out there whose lives were perfect and wonderful and so different from mine. But there's no together people. Everybody's got, the Bible says, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So all of us have sin nature inside. And so a safe person is aware of their own sin nature and are comfortable with being open and honest about what that is. We all struggle with things. So what it would look like, as far as a safe person, is somebody that is comfortable talking about even current struggles. I know that there was a time in my life where, definitely where I didn't want to talk about any weaknesses that I have. I probably was one of those people that say I'm not perfect, which is kind of a shallow thing to say. But where I would only be even talking about just past weaknesses and not even really being more open about the things that I struggle with now. But the truth is that you want somebody that is aware of what it is that are their weaknesses and that they're willing to be open and talking about it. Another one, it says somebody that is religious instead of spiritual. So what that means is, people that quote scripture, they might pound you with verses. That I used to think, and part of the thing when I married my ex-husband is he was somebody that looked good on the outside in a lot of ways. There was a lot about me being attracted to him that was really about my own insecurities and my own need. One of the things, though, that I thought is I kind of just thought that it was enough to have a guy that was a Christian. Like that's kind of how I was raised, too, or taught in the church that I was involved in. It's just like, get yourself a Christian, you're fine, and that somehow that was the magic answer to everything. Well, there are some Christians that don't act anything like Jesus. Like that, I mean, we all obviously, again, have sin, but where there are people that are some of the most evil people on the planet as far as the things that they've done or said that are evil that call themselves Christians. So it can't just be about being a Christian. And so there's a big difference between somebody that is, religious and just quoting scriptures and slap a verse on everything, but there might be legalistic Christians. If you are a Christian and you take the love and grace out of your faith, if you take the love and grace out of the Bible, you don't have the Bible anymore because it's all about love and grace. So it's got to be about more than I'm right, I've got the answers. You've been around Christians like that, that there's a holier than thou, there's a superiority, there's an arrogance, that kind of thing. Well, that's religious and not spiritual. And so we want somebody that their lives and the way that they live it out, that there's some depth there in their spirituality. Okay, another one. are defensive instead of open to feedback. Now, here's kind of an interesting thing. There's a verse of Scripture, if you've got a Bible, you can turn to Proverbs 9, because when I say defensive instead of open to feedback I'm talking about not the nice things, like hearing things about yourself that maybe aren't so nice. And it's not easy to do. Honestly, it's never like fun. I get kind of a little bit of anxiety myself, when I know that somebody's got something to say to me about where I'm off or where I've erred. I can feel kind of the anxiety. But what we want to be is we want to be people that are really open to it, that we have a desire. And again, all of these things that I'm talking about on the safe and unsafe are a continuum. There is no I've arrived. I'm completely open to feedback. Oh, come on, you are not. I'm not, so I don't think you are either. So anyway, but it's just like that we want, what the difference between safe and unsafe is the majority of your life, would people say you're open to feedback, or would people say you're defensive? Meaning that if you've got feedback, that your first reaction is maybe blaming others, like, well, you're this. Well, you're selfish. Well, it's that, that's defensiveness. Or where you've got people that are saying, I am not that, you just, that kind of thing. That instantly, or the majority of the time, that it's more, I am not that way, instead of, really, I'd like to hear more about that. Am I that way? Now, a friend told me, which I believe to be true, and I've tried to really take this to heart, oftentimes our enemies give us feedback that our friends won't, that it's maybe not delivered so nicely, but a lot of times our friends let us get by with stuff. I know my friends do. I mean, I love my friends that I have. My closest friends will speak up and say things to me, but we want to give each other the doubt and the benefit of the doubt, give each other a break, which is a good thing. But sometimes we'll hear criticisms from our enemies that our friends probably won't speak up to us about sometimes, or whatever. So that can sometimes be the jewel feedback. It might not be delivered so nicely, but where we can learn some things about ourselves. So what I've tried to do is that if an enemy says something, to me, my goal, I'm working on this, is that my first reaction isn't, well, come on, you hate me anyway, so what are you talking about? But to first kind of think, can I wear this? Is this something that I can own? And then to go to my friends even and to ask them, what do you think? Is there a part of this? Maybe I'm not as bad as the way that they've painted it, but is there a piece of this that I can own? Because that would be setting ourselves up where we're really welcoming feedback. So we want to be moving in that direction, that we embrace that we're eager for it, that we put ourselves in situations to seek it out, actually. And for me, I've kind of gotten where I'd rather hear if something's wrong, that I'm doing, if I'm stupid, honestly, as painful as it is for me to hear it, I'd rather hear it than not hear it. Because if I'm acting like an idiot, it's kind of, to me, it reminds me of the story of, or the situation, if you ever have a big hunk of something in your tooth, do you know what I'm saying? Like you get spinach in your tooth or something, and you're walking around all day and nobody said anything to you. And you're just going, oh my God, how embarrassing is that? Now, I know it's awkward for somebody to go, can you get that out of there? But I'd rather have somebody say that earlier than me spend the entire day and see how many dozens of people where everybody's now seeing the spinach in my teeth and nobody's saying a word. So to me, that's how feedback works. Do you see the parallel of putting yourself in a place where if I'm doing something that's not really loving, or, I know for me, one of my traps that I fall into that I'm always having to be working at is I'm very task-oriented. And so there are times where I get so wrapped up in what I'm doing that I'm insensitive to others, I'm brusque, I'm not, maybe as warm or as connecting or whatever, and I've hurt people's feelings. Well, I really appreciate it when my friends tell me that, rather than I'm acting like an idiot and doing that to more people, and I'm getting like 10 people that are going, wow, Nancy, what's up? She was just like, didn't she care about me or whatever? So we want to have friends too that speak up to us about this, that help us to grow. So we're looking for people that are open to feedback and not defensive, and we want to be people that are open to feedback and not defensive. These are areas that we want to grow in as well. That should be the goal. Okay, another one here. They're self-righteous instead of humble. We kind of talked about that. Oh yeah, I didn't read this verse. I told you to go there. Proverbs 9, and in verse 8 it says, "Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you." So a wise man, if you rebuke them, they will go, "Oh, I love you for being so honest with me." And I am with my friends. I actually trust people more when they're more upfront with me. When I'm doing something that's hurting or bothering somebody and somebody has the courage to speak to me, that makes me trust that person so much more, that they had the courage to speak up like that. So anyway. So another unsafe person would be that they're self-righteous instead of humble. So, and we get that. One of the things that I know, that we have to get honest about, or that we want to be honest about, is self-righteousness lives in all of us. I know that I have self-righteousness in me. And, we have it anytime, you look at somebody and go, "Gosh, I'm not like them. I'm glad I'm not like them." Come on. That lives in every single person. But there's a difference between, are you somebody that wants to work on that and that is actively engaged in wanting to look at those parts of your life, or are you somebody that, is oblivious to it, Like, it's kind of funny because as soon as you say, "Well, I'm not self-righteous," guess what you just made yourself? You're self-righteous. So, yeah, if you do that. So there's an irony for you. It's kind of funny. Okay, so we want people that don't have that sense that, what's the majority speaking? Are they acting like they're better than other people? Do they have that sense, of knowing more, having all the answers, let me tell you how it ought to be, or generally, do you get a sense of humility from them? Okay. Another one. It says, apologize instead of changing their behavior. Now, sorry is cheap. A lot of people, I know sometimes saying you're sorry is hard, but generally speaking, just saying you're sorry by itself is nothing. It really is not. Because like people, for instance, that are abusers, there's an abuse cycle where somebody will be abusive, whether it's verbally or physically or whatever. And so what happens is that the person that's being abused will maybe retreat or withdraw, and then an abuser will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sorry, sorry," flowers, whatever, and you think they're actually changing, but then as soon as you go back, cycle repeats. Well, that's cheap. Sorry is nothing. When it comes to more significant problems in life, more serious issues like alcoholism or lying or infidelity, these are things that do not change overnight. You don't just say you're sorry, I'm going to turn over a new leaf, and you just magically change. Change does not happen without God Almighty and without other people. True, significant, sustained change, God actually designed us to need other people in that. In Ephesians, it talks about that the way that we grow is that we are one body, that there's one body of Christ, and that we grow as each part of the body does its work, that each person is that part of the body, so that the way you grow, and there's millions of verses actually that talk about that the key to growth is really being in relationship with other people that help us to grow. So that means that if you've got something like alcoholism, or for me, I had issues with infidelity and sex addiction, those are serious things to overcome. I didn't just magically change my life. I know because I've gone through these changes. I've worked with other people that have gone through changes like this. This is not wave a magic wand and your life is overnight better. You need to have a specific course of action that involves having other people there for you to change. Like for me, I wound up doing work with a therapist. That was all that I knew at the time, actually. This was a while back, so there were a lot of things I didn't understand, but working with a therapist and being in that relationship of having somebody help me walk through those steps. It could be a 12-step program, an AA program, an Al-Anon program, some of these kinds of things, or it could be a church small group. You know, we have a lot of small groups in our church program where we do a lot, where it's a team of people that are working together, that are oriented towards growth, that are accountability partners, accountability groups. So if somebody has got some big problem like that and they're saying they're sorry and there's not some concrete way to follow up, nothing will change. You'll think it changes, and this is what fools you, because maybe their behavior seems a little better short term, but they're just going to go back, you know, because that's what real significant change requires for doing these bigger changes in your life. Okay? Let's see, another one. It says, avoid working on their problems instead of dealing with them. So, you know, we actually, that kind of goes together with what we were just talking about that. Here's a really big one. Demands trust instead of earning it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some misunderstandings or misperceptions about trust and trustworthiness. A lot of times people have this idea that you should automatically trust somebody. You meet somebody and you feel bad or guilty. I think a lot of people do if they don't just, if you don't trust somebody immediately. Especially in relationships. I am just amazed at how much we don't value our heart. You know, that we give people the keys to the kingdom right away when we meet people. Or we think we should. We have that expectation of ourselves. People are so, with money, it seems really obvious as far as trust and trustworthiness. Like, you would not just meet somebody and say, oh, would you like the PIN number to my ATM? You know, you just wouldn't do that, and that's a bank account. Even if you didn't have that much in your bank account, you could only have a few $100s in there, and I bet you still wouldn't give them the PIN number to somebody you just met. Do you know, that would seem ridiculous. But the thing is how much does it not, how much is this not making sense that people give their heart to somebody that they just met? Do you see how insane that seems? You know, like, it does not make sense to trust somebody when there has not been a pattern of trustworthiness. The way you know if somebody is worthy of giving trust is what's their history been. You can tell what somebody's going to do. You can absolutely determine what somebody's going to do by what they've been doing. Their behavior on a regular basis, if you look at their history, what somebody's been acting like and doing for a while, that's what they're going to do. You know? Now, well, the way change works, so what makes sense, actually, I'll tell this part first, is that you meet somebody, you give a little bit of trust of what you think would be, you know, you could risk. You know, what are you willing to risk that's not like this, you know, I'm giving you my heart. And then you look at also, if you know somebody and you know what their history is, what's their history been? What's their history been with other people? You know, I think that's actually a good idea. When you're dating, I really advocate asking people about their other relationships. I think it's really wise. A lot of times people get all like, ooh, you know, that's too personal. Well, no, I'm sorry. Like, if I'm going to be in a relationship with somebody or even dating, I would ask people this just casual dating. Because I wouldn't even consider dating them very often, you know, if I didn't really understand how they interacted in their past relationships. Like, if, for instance, the way somebody's relating to their past relationships, if their story is, when they talk about past relationships, is it's all the other person, that's a problem. You know, people can't own, if people aren't owning things, taking ownership is one of the other top things that you need to have on your non-negotiable. Somebody that takes ownership for their responsibility in things, somebody that knows what their part is, you know, and are actively engaged on working on whatever the things are that they need to work on. A high accountability, a high degree of ownership. Somebody that doesn't take any ownership, you cannot have a relationship with that person. It's not possible to have a successful relationship. It just can't work. It's as much as lying. If somebody has no ownership, you can't move forward, you can't grow, there's nothing. So if somebody's relating to, like, the way that they're telling the stories of what their past relationships are all about it's all the other person's fault, that should be ding, 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 red flag, you know. Warning, Will Robinson. So, all these age things, just like, what's that? What's that reference? So, anyway, so that's a big red flag, is a lack of ownership. So you give trust based on what the history's been. So here's another one in talking about people in their past relationships, because that gives you an idea of what the history is part of the ownership is it can't just be that they're choosing badly. That can't be all the ownership that you take. I just pick wrong. No, wait. If you're picking wrong, there's something going on with you that you need to change, you know, that you are responsible for. I know, again, thinking about, you know, the situation as far as marrying my ex-husband went, and how much I saw the red flags. I saw his rage. I saw his anger. I saw all these things, and I blew past them. And the reason I was so hanging on and determined to get married to him anyway was because there were things about him that he had qualities. Like, for one, he was really good looking, and I always had a lot of insecurities about my appearance. You know, I just didn't feel like I was that attractive, so I thought if I got some guy that was attractive, then it would tell the world that I was good enough, you know, that there was something that I was good enough. And so that was coming from a really broken, wounded part of me, that I was like hanging on to that and elevating that quality. Also, that he had an education, which, I mean, I look at it now and it seems kind of silly, like I felt really insecure that I didn't have any education. So somehow being married to him, I was thinking that was going to make me feel legitimate, you know. He also had parents that weren't divorced. My mother was married 3 times. I had a horrific childhood. So I thought it would make me normal. People would think I was normal. Again, it had to do with that, trying to be one of those together people, it was all about trying to have that, fill in all the places that I felt that I was lacking. So I needed to learn to see what was, like, I didn't see that. I didn't see that it was selfish of me to hang on to him the way that I did. You know, that there was a real selfishness and self-centeredness in noticing what was wrong but marrying him anyway, and a recklessness, you know. Again, it was all about filling my needs, really, you know. And it wasn't kind even for me to get into a relationship that I didn't even know that could work out. That wasn't kind to him. That was, you know, for me to, I'm the one that dragged him, you know, that was kind of went after him or whatever. I mean, just the fact that I dragged him into the relationship or got married to him, you know, under those circumstances. So we want to be with people that understand and are taking ownership. And going back to the bigger picture that we're talking about, the trustworthiness, is that I was not like a trustworthy person. Like, I was not somebody that was trustworthy. So I had never been faithful to anybody that I had ever been with. I had major problems with infidelity. So if somebody coming along and met me during those times, it would have been really unwise for them to get in a relationship with me because I was not trustworthy. So how do you go from untrustworthy to trustworthy? It takes then building a new history of trustworthiness. It would have been foolish for somebody to have jumped in at the beginning when I just was newly repentant saying, I've changed. Somebody's going to go, oh, I'll get with her. That would be really stupid too, because it took me taking some time, getting counseling, getting help, and building new patterns. So by the time Adam met me, he knew my history. He knew, you know, that I had been a very untrustworthy person. But he also knew that I had been, for 3 years, I worked on building totally new habits of being more honorable, having integrity, you know, and treating people, valuing people, and having more respect for people. Over a period of 3 years, I built a new history. So then it was not foolish for him to try out giving me some trust. So that's how you go from being untrustworthy into trustworthy, because you can change it, but it's not an overnight process. You should give out trust based on what's the history been. Once there's been a significant history built up, then it deserves to, I'll try a little bit more trust and see how they do with that. And if they do well with that, give you a little bit more trust. So that should be how you keep yourself safe and how you under what conditions do you trust somebody? People get confused too because they mix up trusting with forgiveness. Forgiveness, the definition of forgiveness in the Bible is laying down a debt, meaning they don't owe you. You know, that you've said, you don't have to pay me, this is not a debt, I forgive you. But that doesn't mean just because you forgive somebody you should immediately retrust them. That's totally different. It's not even loving to the person to retrust somebody that's been untrustworthy. For instance, somebody wrecks your car drunk driving. Would it be wise, again, it seems really easy for us to figure these things out with physical property. Would it be wise you got a new car to hand them the keys and go, I forgive you, here's a new car? That, again, it seems really obvious when we think about it that way, but why wouldn't it be the same in relationships? You have somebody that cheats on you, it makes sense that it would take a lot to retrust them. You just don't hand the keys back, I trust you. And a lot of people that are unsafe will demand trust when they haven't earned it. Well, what's the matter? You don't trust me? No, I don't, actually. Oh, you didn't forgive me. People will sometimes use that as a guilt and blame thing. Oh, you're not really forgiving me. No, I forgive you. You don't owe me. You don't need to pay. I don't need revenge for this. I'm laying down the debt. But I can't trust you at this point. You have broken trust, and that takes time to rebuild. Does that make sense? Is that clearer? Because I think that this is an area that people get very confused with, and that people have a lot of guilt and shame because they think they should be trusting people when they don't, and they're trying to pretend that they do, and you've got all this kind of confusing stuff going on. So that's a really important one as far as you can see the difference, because somebody that's trustworthy won't mind earning trust. They're not afraid of that because they've got the goods to back it up, So there's one. Demand trust instead of earning it. Unsafe person. Somebody that's willing to earn it would be a safe person. Another one, which we kind of talked about in this last example, blaming others instead of taking responsibility. We talked about how people relate to their past histories is a big one in blaming or taking responsibility. Another one that we talked about quite a bit is lying instead of telling the truth. We talked about that. I want to actually tell you another story that, because sometimes people have this idea that they see people lie to others and they go, well, they won't lie to me, they love me. You witness somebody's lying to other people, but it doesn't bother you because you think that they love me, they're honest to me. Now that doesn't make sense. Somebody's either honest or they're not. There isn't this double standard thing. It's, do they value honesty or not value honesty? So I remember I was dating another dating story. Get to hear all my private news here. God, I got really bad ones that will be coming later in other sessions. But I was dating this one guy, and he was business partners with his father, and he wanted to go out and do something with me. I don't know. I forgot what it was. Some kind of date. And so he called his dad up while I was sitting there and just totally lied to him about what he was doing. Because he didn't want to tell his dad, no, I'm not coming in today. I'm hanging out with Nancy. And I sat there and was just like, wow. It was just, again, that should have been another one that should have set off a red flag and should have been, if this is that easy for him, that he feels totally fine that he could sit there and lie to his dad, why would I expect that he's going to be honest with me? And then, of course, found out, as time went on, because, of course, I didn't leave at that time because, again, it was all about that neediness and being so desperate for the relationship that I couldn't let it go. Of course, he turned out to be a very dishonest person and got my heart broke, and that was a really ugly, ugly ending as well. So, again, truth should be something that it's, totally lying should be a deal breaker. Okay, here's another one. It says, are stagnant instead of growing. We want to have people, a sign of a safe person is you need to have somebody that's committed to growth, that they care about that. That's actually something that matters to them, that they're looking for. That's one of the things that I really valued about Adam, my husband, who I still today, it's huge. I love that. We've been married 8 years, and seriously, I'm amazed at how much you know, like there's trust. I trust him a lot because he is constantly looking at how he can grow and what he can learn. He's looking at his bad parts and saying, okay, you know, what can I do about these? Avoids closeness instead of connecting. You can't have a significant relationship with somebody that's shut down, that avoids being close to people. Now, another thing that doesn't really work is oftentimes people think, I see this a lot, people that have no connection, they don't have close friends, they don't have deep relationships, and then they meet a romantic relationship and they just let it all out. Like, that's the one place that their whole outlet goes towards that romantic relationship. That's not going to work either, because you need somebody that understands how to develop deep and intimate and close relationships with other people. Because if you're the center of their universe for every feeling and every vulnerability, you can't hold up to that. It's nothing that can actually last, you know? And so you want to look at their other relationships. Do they have deep, intimate relationships where they're opening their heart, where you need somebody that can be vulnerable. If somebody's shut down emotionally and they don't have access to their heart and their feelings, you can't be safe, because everybody needs a place where they can be vulnerable and open their heart. We need that in any safe relationship. That's part of what makes it safe. So you need people that do know how to be close and connect. Okay, another one. They care only about their own needs and desires. Narcissism. That's one that's deadly. If you have somebody that all that they care about is they're only happy when they're getting it their way, when it's all about them, when it's about their needs, you cannot have a healthy, safe relationship with somebody. You need somebody that cares and that wants to ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What would you like? You know, that you matter to them, that your needs, your desires, your interests are of interest to them. It should be both ways. It shouldn't be somebody trying to figure out just what you like, I'll be whatever you want. That's not going to work either. That's a real disaster. Somebody that's just trying to change who they are to please you won't work either. Oh, let's see. Here's a big one. That a safe person knows how to accept and respect hearing your no. An unsafe person does not know how to hear no. You want somebody that, you know how you shouldn't feel bad saying no. I mean, somebody shouldn't make you feel bad. If you're just feeling bad but nobody's making you feel bad, then that's something you need to work on. I think a lot of us have a hard time saying no. Sometimes we've had parents that didn't make it safe for us to say no, you know, where we were shamed, where we couldn't disagree. But we want it to be that it's totally fine to say no. And you're allowed to say no about anything. You get to say no. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be right to say no. Your no is your no. You get to choose. These are things that are your decisions and choices for what you're okay with and not okay with. Now, somebody can say that they don't like it. That's totally understandable. Somebody can say, you know, no, I don't want to go with you. And you could say, well, that makes me sad. I just, you know, was hoping we could be together. That's different than guilting or blaming you about your no. But you want to be in a relationship, if you're somebody especially that has a hard time saying no, you really would, what would be great is to be in a relationship with somebody that actually encouraged that said, I want to hear that, you know, and that gave you space for that, you know, that made sure that if they were asking you something that you weren't just going along, if that's what your pattern is, that they maybe even encouraged you in that. So, so we want to learn to say no if you're uncomfortable with that. You want to make room for other people's no's where you can accept their no, you know, that you're at peace with that, you know, and don't try and manipulate or guilt somebody. So that's a big one. Okay, here's another one. It says flatters us instead of confronting us. So it's kind of interesting, because if you're just hearing nice things from people all the time, if you're in any kind of relationship of any significance, things are going to bother somebody. And no matter how much love there is or whatever, you can't be in a relationship without things starting to bother you. So would you, if you're in a relationship with somebody and something was bothering them, would you rather hear about it Wouldn't you? Or would you rather they kept it to themselves? How is that? Doesn't that feel terrible when you find out that something's been bothering somebody and they never said it to you? You know, because what does that do? It doesn't go away. You know, if you ignore it, it doesn't just go away. So you want somebody that is able to speak up about that and tell you when things are bothering them. So that otherwise, what it does is it builds resentment. And I know we've all witnessed this. We've all done it. I mean, I have. I'm pretty sure I'm safe to say everybody's done that where they've had, we call them withholds, where you're withholding things that bother you, and they build resentment, guys, you know. They just fester. They don't go away at all. So we don't want somebody that just tells us the nice stuff all the time. We want to be in a place that people are comfortable confronting us. All right. Here's another one, is that they act like a parent or child instead of an equal. And you've probably seen that, and maybe you've experienced that. You know, you don't want, it's not appropriate in a relationship if somebody's playing like the little kid, you know, take care of me, or, that's not fun, or somebody that's trying to parent you, you know, be your mom or your dad in that. Neither one of those are healthy relationships. It's important in a romantic relationship for it to be reciprocal. And this is something that I was a little confused about. My therapist told me when I first was going to her that one of the reasons that me being a minister is very, she was saying that ministers and therapists are very similar there's a lot that's similar about the way ministers work and therapists work. And she said that she had this sheet that was about why therapists have a hard time having a good romantic relationship, some of the traps. And the role that we play, whether you're a minister or a therapist, is that normally, like you're always seeing people, a lot of the relationships you have are completely one-sided. That you're relating to people where it's all about their needs, you know, and it's totally unconditional, and your needs don't matter at all. And so you get in this habit that that's what's normal. It's completely one-sided relationships. I'm there for you. Another thing, and that doesn't work in a romantic relationship. So if you know that about yourself, one of the things, you know, if you're a caretaker or whatever, one of the things you need to know is that in romantic relationships, it's got to be reciprocal for it to be a healthy relationship. The other thing about a minister or a therapist is that they have a tendency to look for what they hope somebody will be. It's kind of like you look for the hope, you look for the possibilities. You don't look just for what they are right now. You know, you're looking at people kind of a little bit through rose-colored glasses, so you're seeing the potential maybe. And you can't be looking at that either. It's more where we need to focus on what somebody is right now. And we're going to actually talk about that a little later too as far as false hope. Here's another one. It says, don't keep their promises. One of the things that has hurt most of us that we've had, how much have you been hurt by people that have broken promises to you when you think about it? A lot of the hurts that we all endure in life have to do with broken promises. How different is it as far as your trust with somebody and how safe you feel with somebody if you know that when they say something, they're going to do it? You know? Like, there's people you know that if they say something, you can pretty much count on it. Now, we all break promises. You know, we're not perfect at it, you know, but that's something we want to grow to be more. That should be a priority to us, that we want to keep those promises, that we want to be good to our word. So safe and unsafe, again, on the continuum, it's like, is this person that half the time you have no idea if they said it, you kind of go, oh, maybe they're doing it. That's not a safe person. If you're kind of iffy, whether you can count on them or not. Whereas a safe person looks like, if somebody says it, you're pretty much going to know that they're going to do what they said that they were going to do, and how much safer that is. Because there's been an incredible hurt and harm when you're trusting somebody in somebody that doesn't keep promises. I know one of the big things is that people have been hurt by is kids that have divorced parents. And, you know, when you're a little kid, that's a big deal. When you have parents that haven't stayed married to one another, that winds up hurting you. You know, it has an effect. Little kids can't process that so much. So there's an area that broken promises hurt. I get it that sometimes you go, yeah, it was better that they got a divorce, but in the meanwhile, that's a traumatic thing to go through as far as, you know, knowing, you know, not having that. You think your life is something, and all of a sudden it's uprooted and it's something else. even things like being on time. I know that it's, I could work on that myself. But what a big deal as far as what does that say about whether somebody cares about you, whether you matter, whether you're being respected or not, is if somebody, I have somebody that I had a relationship with somebody that literally they were like an hour to two late every time. Like it was just, I would actually sit in a restaurant, like I knew, like I would go meet them and I knew it was at least going to be an hour. And then they, oh my God, this one person, they would call and they'd lie to me, it drove me crazy and go, I'm 10 minutes away. An hour went by and they're still not there. It just was one of those kind of things. So can't have safe relationships with people that more, don't keep promises. Because last session we talked about this with some people and they were talking about how does that make you feel when people break promises to you, and people were talking about how you feel betrayed, you don't feel valued, you feel worthless. These are all things that why promises matter and how people relate to that. Okay, next. Are negative influence over us instead of a positive one? Take a look at how this relationship's affecting you. The majority of how it's affecting you, is it positive or negative? Are you growing or are you heading the other way? And then last on our list is unsafe people gossip, which is that they say things behind your back that they haven't said to your face. Isn't that the worst when you find out that somebody thinks something of you that they've never shared with you and you found out through somebody else? That's an unsafe person. So that's another one that we want to take a look at. Are people saying things that that they haven't said to this individual, that they're just talking about it. So this is quite a list. I get it that there's a lot of different things to be considered here. Some of the things we want to be thinking about and looking at all of these elements is look at it as a continuum. Unsafe are the people that the majority of the time, if any of these things are things that the majority of the time they're not, if this is what they are, these are not safe people. We want to look for people that are most of the time moving into the direction of being the safe people on this. We want to grow ourselves to be looking at this and to be becoming better at becoming safe people. That's an area that we want to be committed to growing in. And that, can you see that this is not something that we can easily recognize, that it takes some time and learning, and that's one of the reasons why in dating that we want to just be practicing. You can't get this stuff overnight and you can just be discerning. So part of the learning and casual dating, why that can help, is you could practice some of these things. You can also be looking in your friendships, in your platonic relationships, to be practicing some of these things as far as safe people and unsafe people go. So these are all things to keep in mind, to be thinking about, to be learning about. And then what we're going to do in the next part of this, because there's still actually some more things that we want to look at in these negotiable and non-negotiable characteristics. And we'll be talking about other things like faith and how that comes into play. And we'll talk about false hope and those expectations and a number of other things, red flags, in the next part of this. But I just want to encourage you on this safe and unsafe people to be thinking about these things and to be trying to move into your non-negotiable list, to be clearer about how important these character traits are, that you get to the place that you're not going to compromise on this, that they could have all the qualities, they could be the hottest, most gorgeous thing in the world and so smart and funny and the greatest musician of all time and write lovely poems about how wonderful you are. And yet, if they've got character issues, that you get to the place that you can step out and you could say, I can't do this. It's not going to work, because no matter how exciting it looks, that if somebody's not a safe person, I'm going to get my heart broken. It's just not going to go the distance. And so why get involved in some big, heavy relationship with somebody? Because you're either going to get married or you're going to break up. So it doesn't make sense to get involved in this whole big, heavy relationship when you know at the beginning there's no way that this is going to go forward. So anyway, that's it for this segment. We'll see you in the next segment in talking more about negotiable and non-negotiable qualities.
Looking for girls that I just thought were really beautiful, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were able to appreciate me, or I actually liked who they really were. There's a lot of stuff that we just weren't, I didn't even know how to figure it out. I just kind of went with who looked the best, and that was probably not going to work long term.
I always dated guys that didn't have a problem with saying, "You're so beautiful, I love you, I really care about you, you mean the world to me." And those were the kind of guys that I went out with. I went out with guys who said what I wanted to hear, basically, even though a lot of it was just lies, and they were just saying it just to say it, to use me.
And I actually, during that relationship, when I was with her, I thought that I was pretty trustworthy. I thought that, because coming from where I was from, I lied to a lot of girls, and like I said, I cut them off, with no warning. When, like, one week I would be saying that I really like you, and that um, that I've liked you for a long time, and then the next week I wouldn't answer any phone calls. And so I thought that I had come a long way from that when I was with her. I really, I really did. I just wanted to be with her, and and for a while, and then uh, I got I got a job at Bath and Body Works in, like, the storage room, and there was so many girls working there, and I cheated on her a couple of times with some girls that were working there, and I never told her, and I still thought I was trustworthy.
Until I took the break from dating and started to discover what type of relationships I really wanted and needed, and that's platonically and romantically. And, what am I searching for? And that I look back at these experiences and that I didn't find anything like that. And in this time, I've discovered what I am looking for. And that's, super exciting for me. And someone that is valuing themselves. And I think that's what really came up for me during this time of not dating, is that I've established what my values are. I understand what they are because I see how some of my behaviors have been destructive and leaving a wake of hurt behind me, and I'm embarrassed about that. I feel awful. I can't change it, but I can learn from it, and I am grateful that I have in a lot of areas, and I'm sure there's more to discover. But that's where I'm at with that, and I feel pretty blessed to understand what I do value, and that's what I'm looking for in someone who I will date in the future. Someone who values honesty, trust, openness, and most importantly, I think someone who's valuing and even demonstrating growth spiritually as well as emotionally, and that's something important to them. I dream about someone who will fight for me just as much as I want to fight for them, and this is something that I thought I was doing for the longest time in my life. However, I really wasn't. I was lost. I was completely lost, chasing after, it felt like the wind, chasing after things I saw in movies and emulating things I saw as a kid and not even realizing what I was doing. And I'm just so thankful to not be in that space today.
I've gotten to the place where I really want to be the kind of guy that is good for someone else. Because I definitely had a lot of issues too. I had a lot of problems in my last relationship that wasn't all on them. I didn't really know how to treat people right, and I didn't really know how to communicate well, even with other people. And I think being involved with a community of people that have stressed the importance of that for me has been really important. And now I am looking forward to, when I have a lot of healing and when I have more growth in me, then hopefully I'll be able to, be a good guy for someone else. So.
I met my baby's father at 14, going on 15, and I started dating him Well, it was a pretty rocky, rough relationship. age 14 to the age 19. I was cheated on. I wasn't treated right. He was always cheating on me, but I always took him back. I gave him a second chance after another second chance. Right before I got pregnant with my daughter, we kind of separated. We separated for about a good year, and I started dating 2 other guys within that time being before. And one of the guys I really cared about, and I got really emotionally attached to him. And I really thought that I was going to, I thought he was the one. He played that role. But it turned out he was just a player, and he played me for a fool, basically. But then again, I was also playing this other guy at the same time.